Thank you all for coming. My name is Ken Abrams, and I am the chairman of the board of the United Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I will be this evening's moderator. I'm so happy that all of you chose to join us. I would ask a favor that each of you turn off your cell phone or silence them if you have not already done so. There's nothing more distracting than hearing one of the candidates be in the middle of an answer and have somebody's dulcet ringtones interrupting the mood. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of this evening's format for the debate, at the first part of the debate, first of all, we're going to break this up so the Democratic candidates will go first. They will have an hour, and then the Republican candidates will go second. They will also have an hour. So the first part is just going to be the Democratic candidates, and then the second part will be the Republican candidates. The way that it's going to work is that the panelists will ask a series of questions first, and then we'll have candidates asking one another questions. I arbitrarily assigned them each letters. So the candidate, Mr. Waterman will be candidate A, Paul will be candidate B, and Jim Hawkins will be candidate C. So they will go in order where candidate A will ask the first questions, B and C will get to respond, and then they'll follow along. The panelists for this evening's debate are from the Attleboro Sun-Chronicle, political reporter Mr. Jim Hand, who's been a veteran political reporter. He has been doing this for more than 30 years and is well known to pretty much all of you. He looked somewhat aghast at that statement. The second one, we went to the other end of the spectrum, and I know that Jack had a number of questions as to who this woman was. Ariana Conte, who's the second panelist, is a recent graduate from Emerson College. She is a political communications major. She has worked in the Office of Tourism in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and has also worked for a number of politicians, I thought it would be nice to have somebody that is a little bit younger, maybe has a different viewpoint. So that is the format this evening. There will not be any opportunity for the audience to ask questions, so please do not raise your hand. I will not be calling on you. Each candidate will be opening with a statement, followed by the questions, and then they will each get a closing statement. So we will begin with candidate A to have your opening statement.
Okay. My name's Ty. I'm not a career politician. This is my first run for any elective office. Basically, I look at this partially as a social worker would look at it. That's what I've done for 31 years. Licensed social worker in Massachusetts. I supervised foster care for 19 years, mostly in the Boston area. I worked with children and disabled adults, foster parents, trained them, handled all the difficulties of foster care placement would have, medical care, psychiatric care, even some life and death issues. Before that, I worked at Rentham State School for 6 years, where I was a social worker working with profoundly disabled adults and in locked wards, both buildings that I served. And now for the past 3 years, I've been the social worker at the YMCA. Why do I want to be a state rep? Because of each of you. My job is 80%, Paul says, to respond to your needs, your concerns, and give you the best possible help I can. So you call me, I will respond. I like Attleboro very much. Jan and I love it here. And I want to serve on a committee if I can. If I get my choice, I'd like to be on a committee that serves seniors, children, the intellectually disabled, and also the mentally ill. All set.
Well, good evening. I'd like to thank Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, our panelists for being here, my opponents for being here, and everyone here for attending this evening. My name is Paul SALGUEIRO Jr. I'm 23 years old. I grew up in Attleboro. I'm currently finishing my master's degree in criminal justice with certificates in forensic accounting, fraud examination, and mental illness, crime, and justice. I'm running for state representative because I want to make a difference in our community. I want to help people. If I'm elected, I'm going to be a strong advocate for increasing Chapter 70 funding for our local schools and increasing access to public funds for our local schools. I also want to advocate for special education, make sure we have the right resources in our school system, so we put our students in the best position possible to actually prosper. I also want to be the most transparent elected official on Beacon Hill. I'm going to make myself accessible through email, phone calls, social media, and more importantly, office hours throughout our community. I like to have it, either a senior center or maybe a local business. My background's criminal justice, and I've learned a lot in that field, and I really think Massachusetts has made some strides in criminal justice reform, but there's still room for improvement. Correctional facilities, jails, and prisons have now become the new psychiatric hospitals, and that's not where someone should go to be treated at all. It's time to reduce the stigma surrounding mental illness and really try to develop solutions to figuring out how we can get better access to treatment for these individuals. So I ask for your vote March 6th in the special election. Thank you.
Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for organizing this debate, and thank you Ken Abrams, Ariana Conte, and Jim Hand for your efforts. And thank you, Ty and Paulo. It's with sadness today that we're reading about the violence in Broward County. I am running for state representative because I feel I can make a difference for Attleboro. There's a few things I should tell you about me. I'm well educated. I have a bachelor's degree from Colby College and an MBA from Providence College. I have compassion. For years before I was a teacher and had to get up so early in the morning, I donated food to the homeless in Providence twice a week. I never skipped a day. I've been active in the community with the support of teachers and dozens of local merchants. I organized the Rome Boulevard Road Race. The proceeds were earmarked for kids who could not otherwise afford sports user fees. I've owned a gas station, and I managed a group of family-owned auto parts stores. I've taught at the undergraduate level, small business management, so I understand the needs of local businesses in Attleboro. And I have energy. I've completed 15 marathons and 12 Ironman triathlons, and I raced a car at Seekonk Speedway. We all know about the need for a new school, but it's important that we don't forget the bad news from last year. Budget issues forced the layoff of over 30 teachers. Important programs have been cut, and class sizes are growing beyond what's good for our students. I'm proud that I taught at Attleboro High School, and we achieved so much with limited resources, but we cannot allow that excellence to be lost. For years, my job has been to organize meetings with teachers from Attleboro and surrounding towns to meet one-on-one with local legislators and explain how the budget and standardized testing impacts local classrooms. And that every meeting we made an impact. From this work, I've developed relationships with both Republican and Democratic state reps and senators. And it sounds a little corny, but I really can reach across the aisle. I hope I can represent Attleboro in the House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Those are all great opening statements. Ariana, you have the first question, please.
As of June 2017, the plans for the construction of the Rehoboth compressor station were halted. What is your plan for addressing the environmental impact if similar endeavors are brought to this area in the future?
Each one of you will have a minute and 30 seconds to respond. We'll start with candidate A, Mr. Waddle.
Can you repeat that? Because I had trouble understanding a few of the words.
As of June 2017, the plans for the construction of the Rehoboth compressor station were halted. What is your plan for addressing the environmental impact if similar endeavors are brought to this area in the future?
Okay. 66% of the electricity in Massachusetts as of 2016 was through natural gas. I really believe that we need to diversify into wind, solar, and other clean forms of energy. I think we have very much undersold what solar can do. It's just beginning, really, to come down to the average person to put solar into their house for electricity. Paul did. I come from a background where my family had a lot to do with the founding of solar energy. My uncle worked for the Department of the Navy, and he introduced solar energy back in the early 1950s. My cousin ran solar car races against MIT and other universities in New England. We need to start decreasing forms of energy that pollute our world. And that's what I mean by clean. So I would be against any further gas pipelines running through Massachusetts. That's it.
Paul, your response, please?
Sure. So I was talking to a resident the other day about this, and so what I've been hearing, obviously a lot of people are against the compressor station, and I tend to agree with them for one particular reason. If we don't know how these stations are going to affect our communities, I don't think we should go about having it. So I told her my idea would be to have studies done, and anything that comes into our community that's could have an environmental impact on our community. And then I would also suggest that it be an independent group that's doing that study, not the actual companies or anyone that works closely with those companies, because information could be skewed a certain way just to benefit them. So in terms of how I feel about that, I would agree to keep it halted until we actually know for sure how this is going to impact our community. So.
Jim?
Okay, I've actually been active with the group opposing the Rehoboth compressor station. I think I started when I realized that my house was in the 1 mile zone where bad things happen, along with the Wamsutter School and the Hyman Fine School. There's issues in terms of the environment with natural. It's the fracked gas, so it's the most it's the worst kind of gas, the most pollution kind of gas, and also issues with a pipeline that was built in the 1940s, and they're going to compress it to a higher volume without addressing the issues of the pipeline. It is on hold, but from what I understand, there's all kinds of plans other places in the state to add gas lines. And all these gas lines go to seaports. They're for export. They're not going to help our energy costs, not by much. So I definitely oppose it. I think what and I'll bless the people that are working on this. They're very assertive. And what they're working on right now is baseline testing for local wells. So there'll be something to compare to if somehow this does happen, so we can measure the impact for the local environment.
Jim, your first question?
Sure. I want to ask you about the horrible situation down in Parkland, Florida. Last I heard, I think it was 17 dead, many more wounded. What at the state level can you folks do to make schools safer, either in any form, including gun control, or do you feel on the opposite side there's some groups who actually want to repeal our assault weapon ban? Where do you stand on gun control, assault weapons, and school safety in general?
Jim, you get to respond first at this point.
Okay. I thought I had a minute. First of all, I got to say, I think 10 years ago, I was involved in an ESC study for Attleboro High School, and Attleboro High School is ahead of the curve, as they are many other things, for protecting our students. We practiced lockdown, shelter-in-place drills long before other schools did. But there's something that I've been talking about on my campaign, and hopefully I can address this, is the two sides. This is certainly a volatile issue. Some people want to defend their right to own guns, and some people think that they're harmful. And here's a horrible situation. And I don't think it's gone out by enough time yet that we've heard this, but I expect both sides to be very defensive. And I think it's very important that we can talk to people on both sides of the aisle about this, both sides of the issue. It's not going to happen just with people that think that this violence, the school shootings are unreasonable, and it's not going to happen with people that want to defend their gun rights. Somehow, the people that want to defend their gun rights have to explain what safety issues are, what registration issues are for guns, and the people on the other side need to explain what their concerns are as far as safety for our children in our schools. Thank you.
Paul?
Sure. So in terms of, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, in light of the shooting in Florida, what safety measures would you favor, including gun control, to make schools safer, or would you stand on the other side and with groups that say we should repeal the state assault weapon ban?
Sure. So in terms of any shooting like this, all of a sudden two sides always come out, right? Everyone says we either need more gun control or we need more guns to for protection. And I don't think either one of those are the solution. I think in terms of gun control, I definitely think we need some measures, background checks, everything like that. Those with, mental illness, maybe not every single person, some illnesses should exclude you from having a gun. And even then, they're more likely to commit harm to themselves. But what we can do, having school resource officers on campus, I think is important. In terms, if they're serving as a mentor and for security measures, sometimes we see that leaving that and becoming more of a disciplinary resource for our schools, and I think that's not what a school resource officer is for. In terms of assault weapons and rifles, I don't know if anyone really needs an AK or what was the exact weapon with an AR-15 that was used. So I don't know if anyone really needs it. But then again, if we're looking at a criminal side of it, a law isn't going to stop a criminal from obtaining a weapon, essentially, right? So I think making it a real local issue, working with our schools to make sure we have the right security measures in place, and making sure our gun laws are appropriate and actually doing better and good, as opposed to just banning everything. So.
When I was a social worker in Boston, many of the schools that I had to go to, Jim, were locked. When I would arrive during the day, I would have to press a bell. I would be greeted by an officer on duty. And at the time, I thought it was maybe a little bit too much. I'm not so sure anymore. And it's a sad day where we might have to do that. That would be up to the communities and the schools. Obviously, we need to have continuous lockdown drills, and that's a sad thing to say. We have to have that too. This is such a shock to our country. I'm against assault weapons, but I think we have to continue to stress other parts of state government. Mental health has to be a continual concern of ours. Department of Children and Family Services has to be strengthened. Everybody. Well, we have to widen the net of who's a mandated reporter, because that's where we cue people in on somebody is dangerous or suspicious. And it's not a wide enough net for mandated reporters yet. We need to deal with addictions. Thank you.
Candidates, just so you know, this next question from Jim, we will keep the order of response the same, just so you have. I'm just going by what they wrote down.
I'm trying to think with you.
Jim, your next question, please.
Sure. Every single campaign for a state legislature, the candidates say they would support a new Chapter 70 distribution formula to increase aid and to keep up with the changing cost of running schools. But nothing gets done. Chapter 70 aid to schools, in some of our communities, the governor's proposing less than a 1% increase. The Norton superintendent says it doesn't cover the cost of cleaning materials. What would you do if elected to increase Chapter 70 aid to schools and to change the formula so it more accurately reflects the cost of running a school?
Well, the old timers have told me not to promise to do something that I can't do, but I've been active on this very issue at the state level for probably 10 years. We were the first people to recognize that the Chapter 70 funding was cut. People said, oh, it's 1%, you're still getting a raise, but we knew it wasn't. And the president of the teachers union and I went to the hearings on the foundation for the foundation budget review and testified years ago. So this is not a new issue for me particularly. And I've been working with state legislators, both Republicans and Democrats, about this. The foundation budget was designed in the early 90s, before special ed reform, before MCAS testing, before computers, and before healthcare costs skyrocketed. So it's not an accurate measure of what it costs to teach a student in any given community. There's been a review commission that's made recommendations. The legislature is reluctant to enact those recommendations because it will mean it'll cost more money. I see my alert. I could go on for a long time about this. I think I'm in a very strong position to work on this issue. I know how the foundation budget works. I know how Chapter 70 works. I know what the pushback is from both Republicans and Democrats. I can work on this. I can. If anybody can make a change in this, I can. Thank you.
Paul?
So my view is pretty similar. I think we need to look at the foundation budget. Given when the formula was created, I think it's just time for it to catch up to 2018. I think that consists of actually looking at the formula, what we can adjust to it. And I think part of what, at least what I would do as a state rep, is, when we laid off 30-something teachers in Attleboro, I think that's something you should bring awareness to at the state legislator level and say, hey, we're losing teachers, we're losing resources. I talked to families. I remember when I ran for city council, I talked to one resident who took their child out of Attleboro schools because there just wasn't there wasn't resources for special education. So part of it, what I would do is really bring awareness to what's happening in our district, our city, looking at the budget along with any legislator, and really trying to figure out how we can bring it up to the level of 2018.
I would talk, first of all, to our two senators in Attleboro, find out how they feel about this issue. We would become a team, I hope. And maybe we could start forwarding a plan right here through Attleboro to advance it from a 1% increase, if that's what it is right now, to a 2, to a 2.5, to a 3, and build incremental stages where it would go forward. Obviously, the entire budget would have to grow if that happened. I support the millionaire's tax, which is 4% for everybody who earns more than $1 million. It jumps 4% over what the income tax is for the rest of us. Right now, part of that money is scheduled to go to education, and I think this is where it belongs. I would make half of it go to education if it was up to me. I know it's for other things too. And hopefully, if that happened, we would start to get the money we needed to get.
Now, panelists, for this round, just so you know, we're going to go back to the ABC for your responses. Ariana, your second question.
Massachusetts is often considered the gold standard for providing accessible healthcare options for its citizens. How are you going to ensure access to healthcare given the rapidly changing federal landscape on the issue?
Oh, that's a really important question. I've been telling people on the campaign trail that we have to defend our own healthcare system. We should really be proud of ourselves. 12%, no, excuse me. There's only something like 12,000 children that aren't covered by health care in the state now. That's remarkable, and we need to get those 12,000 covered. 40% of our state budget is devoted to health care. And I would not want to see that the piece of the budget that goes to health care decrease, because that means people go off the system. So again, it requires a concerted effort across the board by all the representatives and senators to defend us against health care cuts. It's going to come through budgeting, what's the word for it? Is that it? I missed it. 30 seconds. It's going to come at us real soon from the federal government, and we have to have our ducks in order. The specifics of how we're going to do that, I don't think we've evolved yet. We need to very soon.
Paul, your response?
Sure. So I also don't want to see the budget decrease in healthcare, obviously, and I also agree that the 12,000 children that aren't covered we should help and try and get them covered as well. I think just advocating for these health services, really, and continuing to get them covered. It's my background being mental health, there are a lot of mental health issues that aren't covered for certain individuals. And I mean, you could call any insurance company and just try and find out, say, hey, what mental health services do you cover? And you'd be surprised what they do and what they don't cover. So I think just at the state rep level, realistically what we can do is just continuously advocate for increasing these funds and really trying to get everyone covered, along with making sure every different services are provided through those coverages. So that's, I think we just have to take a realistic approach to this. So.
I think there's some realities as to revenues that aren't going up as much as we need. I would not be so bold as to say I can fix the funding problem for education. I wouldn't be so bold as to say that we need to put more money into health care if that's not going to happen. I think in terms of health care, Massachusetts does lead the country in terms of health care for people. I speak from a standpoint of having the excellent care, but I know not everybody else does. I think in terms of thinking outside of the box, which may be what's necessary in healthcare, as a rule, healthcare costs are determined by risk, and the risk is lower if more people are enrolled in each program. So if somehow we would expand the number of people that were included in Mass Health, maybe not people that struggle to afford it, but maybe charge a little more for other people and have more people in the risk pool, it would lower the risk and then lower the costs, maybe trim some of the impact on our state budget. 40% of the state budget is a lot of money. And I think we do, as a legislator, I would be looking for different ways to make the coverage better without spending more money.
All right, that concludes the panelist section of our debate. We will now move on to the candidates asking one another questions. Mr. Waterman, you will go first. Mr. Salgueiro, you will respond first, and then Mr. Hawkins.
Hello. What surprised you the most on the campaign trail?
Everyone's story about, actually, there was an article in the paper that said everyone's talking about the school issue, and that does pop up often with the new project, but it was more, I hear of a lack of, you'd be amazed how many special education students that I've encountered door knocking. And people just say, like, we really need these resources in our schools, and it's throughout. Sometimes not every school has a specific special ed teacher, and also just the general training that our teachers get. Sometimes they're not specifically trained in special education, so if a student has a mental illness or they're acting out due to that illness, sometimes the teacher doesn't understand that behavior and sometimes will interpret it as acting out. So I hear a lot of stories of lack of resources for special education, to be honest, when I joined Knox, so that was interesting for me.
Jim, I'd offer the same question to you. What surprised you?
More what surprised me is what I didn't hear. I didn't hear anything about transportation. I heard nobody's mentioned it. And how many Attleboro people sit in traffic on 95? Here, near the Rhode Island line, sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic going to work. And nobody's mentioned that. I expected that to be more of an issue, something that could be addressed at the state level.
Mr. Salgueiro, you get to ask the questions, and the response will be Mr. Hawkins first, and then Mr. Waterman.
Sure. Mr. Hawkins, when we had a little interview with Mayor Hero, we were talking about the minimum wage. You seem to be in favor of the $15 minimum wage. So my question would be, what proposals would you make to ensure businesses do not increase the cost of their product or cut labor, and to also, how would you address the fact that professions that currently make $15 an hour would lose their value, for an example, like an EMT?
Well, I think first of all, it's not going to be the $15 minimum wage. The way it's been proposed is not going from 11 to 15 in 1 year. It's going up $1 a year, so it wouldn't turn the economy upside down. And after that, it's tied to a cost of living adjustment. I'm trying to remember everything you asked me about. There have been studies upon studies that costs the selling price of goods from local merchants do not go up because the minimum wage has happened in other states. The prices did not go up. I think that what happens is the minimum wage is increased is that people with lower incomes suddenly have more money to spend, and there's more businesses, and businesses actually thrive when the minimum wage is raised. And you asked me one other question.
Just so professions that already make $15 an hour, their value is decreasing.
I don't think so. I think in terms of an EMT that's limited by local budgets, I don't think that that's true. You shouldn't. It's not fair for somebody to work 40 hours in any profession and not make a living wage. I don't think we should be pitting people against each other for that.
So then I'll ask Mr. Waterman.
Yes.
Mr. Waterman, it's an educational question. You know, we talk about like state aid and whatnot, but aside from that, the internal structure of school system, do you think that our teachers are well qualified to teach, or if there's any room for improvement, like qualified to teach in terms of they can handle all different types of students in their classroom?
Well, that's a very general question, but I'd like to think, in part, that's what you learn by teaching. You learn how to relate to people who are at different learning levels and who have different emotional needs, which have a lot to do with how well they learn. Not really sure. That's an easy question to answer. It's a little vague, I'm sorry. Can you be a little more specific?
It's just, you know, like a general education teacher, if you think they get the necessary training and if they're well qualified to teach essentially in our classrooms.
Well, I think having just a few months for student teaching may not be enough. I think it might be helpful if student teachers maybe had twice as much time. And instead of, I know with me, and it may be different now, I started student teaching when I was a senior. And it would have been much more helpful if I had started as a sophomore or a junior in terms of being qualified. So that much I can assure you.
Cool.
Mr. Hawkins, your questions?
I'm interested as a graduate student, and I've taken a few graduate courses and have a graduate degree, how that's going to affect your thinking as a state legislator.
Sure. I think being just a student in general throughout my time through my undergrad and graduate school, I think it's really taught me how to be a critical thinker, how to really analyze situations, and really understand the value of how research can impact policy. I think so. That's the big thing when we talked about the compressor station, when I said I'd really like to see independent studies being made, because I'm in favor of, you know, evidence-based research and really research-based policy. I don't think we should vote on stuff yes or no when we don't even know how it's going to affect our community. So it's really taught me how to be a critical thinker and value the importance of research.
A similar question for you. As an experienced social worker, how is that going to affect your role as a state legislator on Beacon Hill?
Probably going to affect it a great deal, Jim. I appreciate that. I know that I want to go into I want to specialize in the parts of state government that deal with services to people. I'm very concerned about the cyclical nature of DCF and how when we try to cut back on funding to DCF, suddenly we have foster homes exploding with some very horrible stories. We poured in 100 social workers the governor put in a few years ago, and that's helping, granted, but we don't have enough nurses. We've got 5 nurses, and one of them lives here in Attleboro. I met her in my knocking on doors, for the whole state of Massachusetts, covering DCF issues. So I'm going to look at issues in state government from a humanitarian viewpoint. one of the slogans that I came up with the other day is I think we need a kinder, gentler government. I think we always do, but right now I think it's an absolute imperative because government is becoming anything but kinder and gentler these days.
We will now go on to our closing remarks. The order that has been selected will be Mr. Hawkins, you will go first, followed by Mr. Salgueiro, and Mr. Waterman, you will go last. You each have 2 minutes.
Thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce for organizing this debate, and to Ken Abrams, Ariana Conte, Jim Hand for your efforts, and thank you, Ty and Paulo. I'm honored to be a candidate to represent Attleboro in the House of Representatives. When I organized the Rome Boulevard Road Race, I found a wealth of local merchants, family-owned businesses in Attleboro who wanted to support my vision of a community event that would benefit our schools. We all like to shop local at these local businesses, and they're part of the fabric of Attleboro. Having owned and managed small family-owned businesses, I'm in a unique position to be their advocate. But perhaps I'm proudest of being a teacher at Attleboro High School. Now, a few years later, I see students and I hear what they've done with their lives, what they've become, all since graduating from Attleboro High School. To be a small part of that is something you do not experience in a normal job in the adult world. More than anyone, I recognize the importance of public education in Attleboro. My experience in the classroom will help me to be an advocate on Beacon Hill. I've spent years working with state legislators for public education, and it's clear that if they've not worked in the classroom, they have no way of understanding the impact of legislation on kids and learning. And I've made it a priority in my campaign to talk to both parent advocacy groups and administration. I'm on the school council at Wamsutta. Attleboro is involved in a consortium on testing called MCIEA, and I've made it a point to be involved with that as well. I found we all share the same concerns, and there's no question that I'll be accessible for parents, teachers, and administration if I'm elected. My experiences, both as a teacher and working with legislators from both sides of the aisle, will help me to be an effective advocate for the interests of Attleboro and its public schools. Thank you for everyone who's supporting me.
Okay, so I'd also like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event, a moderator, our panelists, and everyone here attending for attending and listening to myself along with my opponents. I'm running for state representative because I want to make a difference in our community, and I want to make sure everyone's voice is being heard on Beacon Hill. As a district and a state, we face a lot of challenges ahead of us. As a recent college graduate, I'm finishing up my master's degree in criminal justice, and I also work as a substitute teacher in the public school system, so I see firsthand the lack of resources that public schools actually have in our state. I'm 23 years old, and I'm a firm believer in education is the backbone to our community, and I think we should start treating it as it is. The residents of Attleboro should also know what their state rep is doing at all times, so I'd like to make myself accessible to everyone through email, social media, phone. I'd like to hold office hours throughout the community as well. If you need me, I'll be there for you. In terms of criminal justice, as I finish my master's degree, I really see the need for criminal justice reform in our state. We look at our criminal justice system, and correctional facilities have now become the new psychiatric hospitals. And someone shouldn't have to go to jail or prison to receive any treatment. We need to ensure that our law enforcement, our correctional officers are being properly trained in mental health and mental illness. So we as a state and a district have many issues that we face and many obstacles to overcome. However, with dedication, perseverance, and leadership, we can solve these issues and overcome these obstacles. Thank you.
Well, again, I'd like to thank everybody who participated and organized this event. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce. And thank you for everybody who came to listen to us on a busy night. As I said, I'm a social worker looking at public policy from a human angle. I know what I am and I know what I'm not. But what I am, I think, is somebody who can help oversee Division of Children and Family Services, Division of Mental Health. I believe I'm very solid in educational issues. I'm very concerned about issues like quality of care of nursing homes, quality of care of assisted living, which I understand doesn't have a lot of regulations. I'd love to see more nurses be working for DCF. That's something I learned during this campaign. I want to have us, I think we're proud of Massachusetts, and I want to extend our care even further. We need to hold on to the medical care that we offer. That's so positive. We're kind of like a beacon of light, I think, to the United States there. And get those other 12,000 children covered by health insurance. So you're seeing a whole panorama of human issues that I would like to touch on should I be elected, and just help us become a more gentler, kinder government. Stumbling over my words, but you know what I mean. Thanks.
I'd like to thank our candidates this evening. I think the city of Attleboro is very lucky. You have 3 people up here that clearly care about the community and clearly care about wanting to make a difference. I commend all of you for coming out tonight. I was having a conversation earlier with one of our panelists talking about elections and the fact that many people do not vote at the primary level and will not vote at a special election, yet these are the elections that are most important. And these are the elections that will help shape your community or keep the things in your community that you find important, or perhaps tear down the things in your community that you find important. I would like to compliment the candidates. Your civility this evening was impressive. The fact that you all 3 very much care about the community that you are trying to serve, and the fact that you were very civil to one another is certainly a refreshing change from some of the campaigns we've seen recently, and it is a breath of fresh air. I would urge all of you to make sure that you get out and vote. Your vote is important, your vote counts, and your vote matters. And make sure that others vote with you. I have a friend of mine that once wrote an article that said, it's a popular belief that everybody should exercise their right to vote, and he doesn't necessarily believe that. He believes that people need to be informed. By being here this evening, you're trying to make sure that you are well informed and making sure that whoever you check the box or pull the lever for is somebody that you feel very comfortable for. So again, make sure to get as much information as you can, get out there and vote. I'd like to offer a round of applause for our candidates this evening. I think they did an admirable job. So thank you all. In just a few minutes, we'll have our Republican candidates up here, and we're going to change a little bit so that we move from one side of the aisle to the other, and hopefully, whichever side wins, they'll be able to work with the other side.
Hopefully.
those of you that have stayed, we are now on to the Republican portion. The rules are, and the format is going to be pretty much the same. We may extend it a little bit because the Democratic candidates asked or answered questions a little quicker than we thought they were going to. So we may add an extra question from our panelists, and then depending upon time, we may let the candidates ask one another an additional question. Again, for those of you that were not here earlier, my name is Ken Abrams, and I am the current chair of the Board of Directors of the United Regional Chamber of Commerce, which apparently this is part of what you get to do as your duties. Nobody told me that when I was elected to the position. We do have two panelists this evening from the Sun Chronicle. Novice political reporter Jim Hand, who took exception to my mentioning his age, and a 7-year-old Ariana Conte who looks really good for her age.
She's 29.
Ariana is a recent graduate of Emerson College and is a political communications major, and we thought we would get somebody who looked at things a little bit differently and is not from the area. And I will ask the candidates to introduce themselves. They will each have an opening statement. Do you guys have candidate A and B?
No.
Well, to be fair, we will allow Julie to be candidate A since it's women first, and I believe in chivalry. And Jeff, you will be candidate B. So we're going to start with our opening statements. You each have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Julie.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce and the moderators for hosting this event. It's a pleasure to be here before all of you this evening. My name is Julie Hall. I'm a retired military officer with 30 years as a healthcare administrator. I think it's important for people to know that I entered the military at the very bottom enlisted rank, and I worked my way up, and I retired as a full colonel. I say this not to impress you, but to demonstrate my desire and determination to work my way up the ranks, to really work side by side with people that I wish to represent, and to gain firsthand knowledge of how this city works and what's important to my neighbors. Since my arrival to Attleboro, I've worked hard and consistently getting out there with people I serve to earn your trust. I started my public service here in Attleboro with the Planning Board, and now I'm on my second term as a city councilor at large. As a sitting councilor, I'm already accustomed to serving in this capacity and to successfully represent all of Attleboro's residents, including those in Ward 3B. My focus is to always have my eye on how state-related issues affect this city here, and to bring that state money right back here to Attleboro. I love this city, and it will be my pleasure to continue serving you proudly. I will be your voice and advocate for Attleboro's interests at the State House. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
My name is Jeff Bailey. Many of you already know me. I have lived here in Attleboro for more than 30 years now, and have served as the pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Attleboro, and also the founder of Grace Baptist Christian Academy. I believe that we as a state have a number of issues that we are facing, significant issues regarding transportation, health care, opioid crisis, number of other things, affordable housing, so many issues that we are facing, and it is in our best interest to put the very best that we can at Beacon Hill that can work creatively with each and every one of these issues, to work across the aisle, but not just to have meetings, but to actually work on creative solutions. I have been doing that for the last 30 years. I focused on a number of things. I have worked in constituent services at the State House for the 8 months of 2017. I was working with Representative Jeff Deal, who was running for U.S. Senate, and I worked with him in his constituent services as his volume increased significantly when he announced his candidacy. So I understand the kinds of things that a state rep needs to do. I've worked on housing issues for people of Whitman and Hanson, not for Attleboro, but I'm looking forward to doing doing that with Attleboro as well. I have been involved in working with various campaigns. Probably the most significant thing that I have done to this point is to work on the 2014 gas tax issue, which was indexed to inflation. I put together a team that got 8,000 signatures, and then I traveled the state after I was defeated in a primary in 2014. I traveled the state talking to groups, newspaper editorial boards, working with them, and we were able to win that with over 60% of the vote, even though we were outspent 30-1. I believe in creative solutions. I have been doing them for the last 30 years, and I look forward to doing them as a state representative, and I ask for your vote on March 6th.
Thank you both. Ariana, your first question, and Julie, you will respond first, and then Jeff, you will have the second response.
Reliable and accessible public transit often go hand in hand with access to job growth and expanded business opportunities. Can you speak about how the Foxborough and South Coast MBTA railway expansions will impact this community?
Well, I think that we've already seen how the MBTA has impacted this community, and one of the wonderful things that have happened here in Attleboro is the partnership between the state and the city of Attleboro to improve the MBTA here. Transportation is very important. It's a very important issue. I am the chairperson of the Greater Attleboro Transportation Authority, and in being in that opportunity, I do hear a lot of the issues, and I actually have an opportunity to help impact in a positive way some of the issues that people bring up. I have had people call me and talk to me about different places that they needed to be picked up and brought to. We've worked with a lot of seniors also in doing that. But I think that it is very, very important as far as transportation goes. We need to make sure that we have a very sound MBTA system, a very sound train system. We need to put the money into that kind of an infrastructure. We are in an awesome place being where we're located, halfway between Providence, Rhode Island, halfway between Boston, and we do have young professionals that rely on this transportation, in particular here in Attleboro, to get to where they go to work. So I'm a huge advocate of making sure we have that infrastructure sound. Thank you.
The MBTA is vital to the economic development of this region. I have been down to the New Bedford Standard Times, met with their editorial board, and one of the things that they wanted to talk about was South Coast Rail. It is an important issue for them. I understand that, but my focus is going to be on how it affects Attleboro and what the MBTA and how we work that line as it goes up to Boston every day. You come by here in Attleboro, you will see the MBTA parking lot is full by 8 o'clock in the morning, and the commuters are headed up. The MBTA is in trouble. $111 million shortfall that's just been announced. Cliches aren't going to cut it. Okay, we need to have solutions. Okay, we have issues. There is a backlog of maintenance in the billions. I'm not sure what the exact number was when I ran for state senate in 2012. It was $2 billion worth of deferred maintenance. I'm not really sure. This campaign has been pretty condensed, so I haven't been able to do as much study as I normally would. But it was $2 billion then. I don't know that it's much smaller today. The rolling stock is aging, and we have some serious issues there. Part of the reason that we have all of the congestion on the highways on 95 is because the MBTA has become unreliable, especially in cold weather. And that is because the rolling stock has become aging. We have serious issues, and we need to have creative solutions. And I intend to wrestle with that. And we have some things, but my time is gone. Some solutions, so maybe we'll bring that up a little bit later in the debate.
Jim, your first question, please.
Yes, folks, I have to ask you about what happened in Florida. It's too big to ignore. In concrete, specific terms, please tell us what measures you would favor, including gun control, to make schools in particular and society in general safer.
And Jeff, you have the first response here.
Well, Adley, this issue, as you brought it up, it hit especially close to home for me. My youngest brother is a Broward County sheriff and was one of the first responders to the event yesterday. My sister-in-law, his wife, is a dispatcher, and she dispatched the officers there. So this is something that we've been communicating back and forth. My niece and nephew are students in the school district there. So this really hit close to home. Nonetheless, I do not favor gun control. I do not believe that is the issue. I believe that that what we had yesterday and in the other horrific shootings, the issue is mental health. And that is where we really need to focus our attention. When I was growing up in the 1970s, I know that ages me, but as I was growing up in the Midwest, in Michigan, almost all of the guys I went to school with carried guns to school. Almost all of them. They either had them on a rack in the back of their truck, and many of them brought them into school and stowed them in their lockers. We had a shooting club in the high school, but we didn't have school shootings. Something has happened that has nothing to do with guns. Things are happening in our society, and it is not just one thing. It is a seamless garment, and we've got to approach all of this. So when you talk about specifics, mental health is the main issue, but what are the things that are impacting that? We're just seeing so much more of it, and we've got to wrestle with it. Like I said, in 1 minute, it's hard to get any more specific than that, but I do not favor gun control.
Julie?
Thank you. Before I say anything about gun control, I just want to make a comment that our hearts go out to the people in Broward County, and we need to keep that in mind, and everybody think about what happened there, because that's important that we mention that. That was a devastation, it was a tragedy, and that's what's important about this discussion. I believe strongly our Second Amendment rights come with great responsibility. And I think that the solution needs to come from the gun community. I remember a discussion right here in City Council when we were talking about hunting. And one of the hunters said to us, we don't like people that go out and give us a bad name. We like to police ourselves. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen. I think that the gun control community has to come up with a solution to this problem. We need responsible gun owners. They must take the lead. They must promote safe gun ownership, sensible laws, universal background checks to keep firearms out of the hands of dangerous people, safe and secure storage of firearms to prevent access by children or unauthorized person, and a partnership, which you heard other people talk about tonight, with the mental health people, public health, and physicians, because the physicians in particular are the ones to get to see these people when they come in the emergency room, and that's extremely devastating. So they need to be part of this discussion too. Thank you.
Jim, you're going to ask your second question, and this time Julie will answer first, and then Jeff.
All right, well, let's follow up. You both mentioned mental health. Local hospital administrators tell us that they have people in their emergency room taking up beds who maybe have a mental health episode, I hope that's the right term, or a drug overdose, and they can't dismiss them because there's no place to go. If you're elected, what will you do to address this problem? Please, again, specifics. How would you create more beds and more treatment? Or do you even think that's the issue?
Yes, I think that's exactly the issue. And as a person who was a behavioral health specialist and a hospital administrator, I can confirm exactly. The people that come in that do have mental health issues oftentimes can be combative, but they do take up a lot of resources and oftentimes cause unsafe situations. When they come in the emergency room, they have to be held in the emergency room. You're absolutely right. There's usually not a bed in the hospital, and I can tell you I've talked to the sturdy physicians about this in particular. It's very disruptive to their emergency room. They wish they could do something for these people, but there are no beds to put them, especially with opioid treatment, and which is one of our largest things. So I think there needs to be more money put into mental health. I think you need to pay the mental health professionals more money because, there's still some stigma. I know it. I was a behavioral health specialist. We need to take away that stigma from that, and we need to allow people to come out and get behind this issue. It's easy to go and to treat somebody who has a broken arm, but when they have a broken head, if you would, it's a little bit harder for people to understand that. So we need to have more education about that, more money put into mental health, pay our mental health professionals more money, and of course try to figure out how to get better beds and a better distribution system throughout our community. Thank you.
Well, I am not a behavioral health specialist, so I am not going to be able to adequately address some of the treatment issues, and I'm not going to try because that's not my area of expertise. What I do when I don't have an area of expertise is I go to the people who do have that expertise, and that's what I've always done. So I will seek out people who know this issue inside and outside. I will pick their brain and I will hear what they have to say. I do know that one of the things, though, as far as increasing the beds here, is that there is always a continual effort to shut down aspects of the Taunton State Hospital. I think that we need to not let that happen. I will join in with the representatives from Taunton, Representative O'Connell, who's a close friend, as well as others, and Senator Pacheco, who's in the other party. I would have differences with him on other issues, but I would agree with him on this one. We need to keep that open. We need to make sure that those beds are available, and where we can, we need to expand it, not shut down. We've shut down so many of the treatment facilities, partly because they were old, and we haven't done what we needed to do. But that one is there and needs to be utilized, and it needs to be kept open. And it's always going to be a continual fight, because every single budget, whether it was Governor Patrick's budget or Governor Baker's budget, there is always that temptation to cut in that area, and we're just going to have to battle that.
Ariana, your next question, and in this time the order will be Mr. Bailey first and then Ms. Hall.
With increasing reliance on social media and the internet to gain information, how would you ensure your office, if elected, would be transparent and accessible to your constituents?
Me first?
You first.
Yeah, social media, I'm at an age where the social media, I'm still trying to get comfortable with it, to be honest with you. I don't do real well with the social media. Any of you who are friends of mine on Facebook, you rarely see a post, because it scares me to death that whatever I say might be out there forever. So I'm very careful, and I think that all of society would be wise to probably be a little bit more careful about what they say. But when you talk about openness and accountability, I will tell you there is one thing that I will fight for aggressively, and that is to make sure that the legislature is accountable to the open meeting law. They hide the things. They do everything behind closed doors. It needs to be done out in the open. Every committee on Beacon Hill needs to have the same laws apply to them as apply to our city council. I will battle that. If I am fortunate enough to be there in January of 2019, and they have that first session for the rules, I guarantee you I will be there fighting for accountability to the open meeting law. So I will battle that. When I ran 2 previous times, I fought for getting committee votes up online, and our mayor, who I ran against in 2014, he responded to the challenge and put his own committee votes up online, even though the legislature didn't do so. I appreciated that. It gave me an opportunity to see where he was coming from on a number of issues. I think it's important that we do that. So I will make sure that I will do what he did. I will put my votes up online, and the problem is that the legislature said we don't have the. Okay, I got to stop. For me, I am always ready to talk. It just can't stop.
Julie.
Thank you. I've actually got a great learning curve that I went through. I'm actually Twittering now, and I do have a Facebook page, and I have used a website. I think it is important that we understand a couple of things. There is a younger population that we want to get engaged in politics, and I think you have to reach the younger population with the medium that they used. However, there is still a population out there that doesn't use the computer. I remember my mom and dad would never get a computer. We set them up with some little device that only did emails just so we could speak to them. So you have to remember that there is a population out there that isn't computer savvy, and you need to be able to reach out to them too. So there's many different medias that you have to use, but I think the focus in particular is you will reach more people if you are on social media. Most people are using it, are learning it, and you do have to be very careful. You know, everything you do in life is great. You have a great responsibility to make sure that you use it carefully and appropriately, and that you have to realize that once you put something out there, what do they say? It's out there forever. So every time you communicate, you need to be able to understand that the way you say things, how you say things, you have to say them appropriately. And I heard someone else say earlier, kindly. I think if people were kinder on social media, it would be a better world. Thank you.
Jim, your next question, and this time the order will be Julie first and then Jeff.
The State Cannabis Control Commission. is developing regulations for the control of legalized marijuana, and they've come out with draft recommendations, and there's been considerable criticism, and Governor Baker, for instance, has come out against some of them, and he's opposed to, they want to allow for marijuana cafes, so people could go to cafes and smoke or whatever they do. In any case, what either legislation or regulation would you favor to control what is now going to be legalized recreational marijuana?
And thank you for that question. First of all, we need to understand that Massachusetts is a yes state. So Massachusetts said yes to the legalization of marijuana. So the first thing as a legislator is I have to uphold the votes of the citizens. That's the most important thing. And the other thing is Attleboro was a yes city. Now, given that, I think over and over again, and I've been part of the discussion bringing in medicinal marijuana, the safety is the ultimate thing that you have to watch out for. I have recently read an article from the Massachusetts District Attorneys Association, who was extremely upset with the Cannabis Control Commission because they felt that they were going beyond their legislative powers and expanding the bill and expanding the legislation to suit themselves. And they kind of gave the Cannabis Commission a warning to not do that. So I thought that was very good, and I thought it was commendable for those district attorneys to do that. I don't think this is over with yet. I think no matter what we do, we have to do it safely and to protect the people in the way that we go about it. Thank you.
When this issue came up for the ballot, I was very clear, and I voted no. So yes, Attleboro was a yes city, but I was a no. And I still believe that. However, as the counselor has said, Attleboro has voted for it. I do not have the right to impose my own personal beliefs on anyone else. And this is a case where I would not. The Cannabis Control Commission is wanting to have an immediate rollout of regulations. Governor Baker is pushing back against that. He wants a longer period and wants to hold it. I believe, and this may surprise some, but I believe since it was voted, I believe in an immediate rollout. I do not believe that we need to hold off on that. I disagree with Governor Baker on this issue. I don't disagree with him on a lot of things, but on this one I do, because I will represent the people of Attleboro. I'm not going up there to do whatever Governor Baker tells me to do. I will represent the people. So I believe this should be immediately rolled out, and I'll tell you the reason why very, very quickly. I believe that the longer it takes, the more it's going to push out small operators, those who are going to hold their small business, who want to get into this, into the social clubs and other things that they have. And it's eventually coming, and the corporations are going to be the ones that have it. And I don't think that the big funders should have exclusive right to this. I think that the small operators, the small business people ought to have just as much of an opportunity, and they will get that opportunity with an immediate rollout. They will not get it if it's held back.
Ariana, your next question, and again, Jeff, you will go first in the responses.
Can you speak about how you would advocate for this district regarding public education funding and the funding of other public education programs?
Well, this goes along, it's a little different than the question as you related to the candidates that preceded us, but it still goes along the same lines. Public education and the funding of public education is the issue. I mean, here in Attleboro, we're right in the middle of a significant discussion as to the funding of education. The biggest issue that we're facing is how much state money is coming. Let's not pull punches. I mean, I heard the previous candidate saying, well, we need to get more state money. Look, the state is there's not a lot of money forthcoming. Okay, we need to fight for every penny that we can, but it's not happening. We're spending 42% of the state budget on mass health. And much of the expenses that go to a public education is involved in healthcare costs for employees. We need to get a handle on those costs. We still need to meet people's needs, but we've got to get a handle on those costs. We've got to do things to lower the cost of healthcare, and we need to do things to lower the cost of health insurance. That is going to reduce the costs and enable the public education system to function more effectively. But public education is changing so fast. I'm an educator. I started a school. I teach in a school. I've administrated a school. I've overseen the building issues with that school. I teach every single morning. I taught this morning from 8 to noon. So I understand. And education is changing so fast. In my school, I'm only going to have 3 high school faculty next year, but we're offering 58 classes. Now, how do we do that? Because we are being creative and we're doing new things. I believe the public school systems are going to come along and do that as well.
My turn? Mm-hmm. So you asked, how do I advocate? I attend the financial meetings for the school board at every opportunity that I can. I interact with the school at every opportunity that I can. Today, I was at a tour, an orientation with the senior population, because we feel that that's one of the hardest populations that we're going to have to win over in order to get this new high school. So I was part of the group to get that group together to make sure that the seniors were informed properly about what was going on with the new high school. And I think that's beneficial for both the new high school and for the senior population to have that opportunity. So I advocate for this particular high school consistently, and our public school system consistently. I am a huge advocate of the career, technical, and education portion of our school. Here in Attleboro, we are in a very good situation to have that here. And I think what you'll find is Governor Baker has also recently spoke about how important vocations and trades are. I'm hoping we can leverage that we have this going for us, because we have a school here which hopefully, if they put their money where their mouth is, we will be able to get more money coming to our school, because we're going to have a world-class vocational and technical program here in Attleboro. So that's how I advocate. Thank you.
All right, that concludes the panelist portion of our program. The rest of the debate, the candidates will be asking one another questions. Initially, it was supposed to be only 2 questions. Do you each feel comfortable asking 3 questions?
I suppose so. And once again, I have a clarification. Can we respond to the answer? Do we have an opportunity to respond to the answer? I don't recall that in the thing.
That was not.
We have time.
So when we ask the question, they answer it, we will have, what, a minute to respond?
That would sound fair to me. Yes.
A minute 30, okay.
I think a minute and a half.
A minute and a half, okay.
We want our minute and a half.
Minute and a half to respond.
Okay, very good. Okay.
So let's start with the 2 questions that you have for one another, and then if there is time, then we'll allow a 3rd question. So for the first question, Julie, you'll start.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to stay on education. So I have sat in many of the school finance committee meetings, and I think it's important to understand the challenges of this public school here and what they encounter. Can you speak of some of the specific budget challenges our Attleboro public schools face today?
Well, obviously, and I don't, I have not attended the particular finance meetings, but all of our schools, whether it's here in Attleboro or across the state, are all facing the same basic crunches. Number 1, special education. Special education costs are skyrocketing, and the resources to be able to pay for that are not, are not forthcoming as quickly. So we know that special education is a major issue. We know that vocational training, and you have spoken regarding vocational training, but that is very expensive, to be able to put forward. But we also have, once again, staffing issues. You have issues related to healthcare, particularly, and that to me is still the biggest drag, that we're facing. The trajectory that we are on as far as school spending is not sustainable. We have pension issues that we are sitting on a time bomb as it relates to across the state on pension issues. If we don't deal with those things, we need to move to We need to move for all new employees. We need to move to a 401k type of a system, so defined contributions as opposed to defined benefits. I think the ones who are already there, a promise made, should be kept, and so I'm not suggesting that we do away with their retirement, but we need to begin to phase that out and get a handle on the pension systems. These are systemic issues. We could talk about each individual school and what they deal with, but these are systemic issues, and we're going to have to come up with serious creative solutions.
You have a minute and a half to respond now.
Back to that?
Well, you can respond to my answer.
To your answer. Okay, and I think that was a pretty fair answer, so thank you for that. I think some of the budget issues that we're dealing with, in particular, and you did bring up the health care, so that always comes in as a thing. The other issue that they have here is if the McKinney-Vento is okay, and something that they talk particularly about at our finance meetings is the burden, if you would, that gets placed on, and this is when somebody that's actually a resident here gets to go to another school, we have to continue to pay for the transportation. And it's not just the transportation, but if you have a child in the same situation with some special needs, that in particular that transportation is expensive. So that's also, and you brought up transportation as concern, but some of the rules and regulations that the state puts on us, we have to have a better way of being able to move that student. Say, for instance, they go to another district, we have to be able to do that quicker. It tends to take a long time to sort of get that person off your rolls, and we have to be able to do that better. So that's one of the things that we can do to make things different. And I'm going to go back to vocation and technical again. I think that the vocational technical options that we have here, what I'd like to see is a more direct partnership with the state of Massachusetts so that we can keep our students in the state of Massachusetts, that they can find a living here in Massachusetts, and that the state tells us what the needs are and then incentivizes those schools that are able to produce that. It's a win-win for the state, it'll be a win-win for Attleboro, and that's what I'm concerned about, winning for Attleboro.
Mr. Bailey, your first question?
Well, let's stay on that subject as it relates to the health care issue. As we mentioned before, the 42% of the state budget is being eaten up with Mass Health. Share with me, and obviously the audience here, share with me what specifically, or what specific recommendations you would make that would deal with some of those costs and bring some of those costs down.
Thank you. As a hospital administrator in the military, I was an executive in one of the largest socialized medical systems in the world. So we ran into these same kind of issues. The biggest thing that we did to bring costs down is to go to a formulary, a generic formulary, and to restrict the pharmaceuticals that are on that formulary, because pharmaceuticals is probably one of the highest expenses that we have. The other thing that works to bring costs down is what's called managed care or accountable care organizations. So when you have like people in a particular group, you can treat those people properly. If you treat those people properly, the outcomes will be better, and hopefully the costs will go down. So managed care is what they used to call it. I think they call it accountable care now. I think they change the name every couple of years just to, throw us all off. But managing a population helps bring down the costs, and it's also good. It's good care for those patients also. So those are the things I would do.
I appreciate the answer. I would look at some other things. First of all, some of the other states across the country are doing a great job at examining and continually to examine on a more regular basis eligibility requirements. I think that as a state we need to be more diligent in making sure that the people who are on our Mass Health program or Commonwealth Care, or what, I'm not sure what the name of it is now, it changes from time to time, but whatever it is, to make sure that they are eligible to be there. I think we need to pluck the low-hanging fruit to begin with. We need to make sure that we are not subsidizing those who are not here legally. We should not be paying for full benefits for that. Emergency care use, of course. We don't want to see anybody. We don't want to see anybody dying on the streets because they're not here legally. But when it comes to the full-blown health care issues, we should not, we should not be subsidizing that. To me, that's an eligibility requirement that we should be looking at very closely. We need more urgent care centers, much cheaper than emergency rooms, and that would alleviate some of the things that we mentioned in an earlier question as far as the crowding in the emergency rooms. We need to incentivize mass health participants to find higher value providers and save money. So those who actually will do the job a little cheaper and find a way to incentivize that. I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I would work with the business community. I think we need to expand medical savings accounts, a lot of different things that we need to do, but we need to get the cost down, and we need to really get a handle on some of these mass health costs.
Your next question, Julie?
I would just like to, yes, respond to that. Do I get that opportunity to do so?
No, you can ask another question.
Okay. Well, okay.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so I will ask I like this question. So this question is about women in politics. I am really happy to see that the council is well represented with women. However, at the state level, there is still a disproportionate underrepresentation of women. Why do you think this is, and what would you do to help balance that out?
Well, I believe I'm not a proponent of identity politics. To me, you vote on the very best person that you can, whether they are female, whether they are male, whether they are gay, whether they are straight. You vote the very best person who is the most qualified to do the job. And so I can appreciate that at the state level, that there is probably a need for more women. But with all due respect, Julie, I'm hoping that you're not going to be one of them as we go, because I'm running against you. So I'm hoping that there'll be one less. I'm just joking. Okay, you know that. So, but I just believe we just go get the best person that we can get, and if it happens to be a woman, it's a woman. If it's a man, it's a man. That's where we should be focusing, not on gender identity and all of these things. It isn't about what your gender is. It's about, are you the best qualified person to serve?
Now you may respond.
Now I may respond. And given that, I agree with you 100%. I think it is very, very important that there are good candidates out there and you do choose the best person for the job. So I do agree with that 100%. However, I think that there are some things that we can do to help get more women involved in politics. I am a big proponent of people moving into areas that they haven't gone into before. It's obvious from what I did in my prior career. I think it was important to do that. I think that if people didn't open the doors and give a little push, if you would, that some of those things would not happen. So I do agree that you should be chosen by your ability to do the job. And I know I am capable. I am very capable of doing this job, and I've proven that. So I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Bailey, your next question.
Okay. Let's talk about an issue that I wasn't sure we were going to get to, but this would have been one of the questions that kind of added in here. We have not talked about affordable housing. Mm-hmm. So let me just ask you, what would you do to promote more affordable housing here in Massachusetts?
I can tell you what I've done to promote affordable housing here in Attleboro. So we have a couple of different projects that we've had most recently. If you are familiar with 67 Mechanic Street. So 67 Mechanic Street is ready to break ground in the springtime. This is an affordable housing project. This is a 40B project. We got money from the state to help with that. And the reason why is because it is an income-based project. So I have worked on bringing that into the city of Attleboro. The other thing, if you look at the transit-oriented development area, that's a smart growth project. And with each one of these projects, we do get funding from the state. I think that we need to look at the downtown area and explore some more opportunities of 40B, affordable housing, and to get some of these grants and projects to work together. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see somebody go down and develop some affordable housing and to throw into that an opportunity to repair the parking lot, to raise up the parking lot a couple of levels, and see how much money we can get from the state for doing some pretty smart things in Attleboro. My suggestions.
I believe that affordable housing for our veterans as well as for others is a significant issue. As pastor of a church, I am dealing with people who are always right on the verge of, of losing their place to live. 40B housing is important, and I don't mean to diminish that, but when you start talking about affordable housing, even 40B housing is out of reach for many people in this community, especially more of our disadvantaged, part of the disadvantage of the community. We need significant more units. The price tag of housing in Massachusetts is skyrocketing. We need more units. Governor Baker has got a good start, 135,000 new units that he's trying to bring online into Massachusetts, wants to see that happen. It's a good start, but we need to find even more affordable housing, even beyond 40B, so that people who cannot afford $1,500 a month for an apartment can still find something that they can afford. And that's going to require a partnership not just with state agencies, but it's going to require partnerships with developers and landlords. I attended a meeting this past Saturday where our elected representatives and our state senator, who is here this evening, spoke regarding affordable housing. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth, and even the participants in the meeting, but one thing that was never mentioned was landlords. Nobody mentioned bringing them and making them part of the process. As a state representative, I would bring in all of the interested parties, all of the people that would have an effect on this, so that we can all work together and find a way to do that. I did that down on Oak Hill Avenue. I can do it again.
All right, we are now to the portion of our debate where each candidate will have 2 minutes to do a closing remarks. And Candidate Bailey, you will go first.
Tonight, as we have debated back and forth, you heard very similar issues. We are Republicans, and so certainly our outlook on things is very, very different than what you heard from 7 to 8 on many issues. As far as who I am as a candidate, I have been a person who has worked creatively to do a number of different things. The property that my church has on Oak Hill Avenue was in a dilapidated condition. I put together a very creative program to be able to purchase that property. As a result of that program, I had to go out of state to find funding. It was so complicated, and all the number of attorneys that were involved. But I brought together the Audubon Society, I brought together a developer, and I oversaw that. And that was a challenge because they had very different outlooks on the way property should be done. And yet I brought them together, we worked together, and as a result of that, and what was said was impossible. One attorney said, "This isn't possible to be done." I don't believe in impossible. I believe in getting the job done, doing whatever is necessary to get the job done. And so we brought them together, and today the Audubon Society was able to double their sanctuary. It's a gem of the city. We have a very, very wonderful family neighborhood on Erica Way that has been built, and other houses that have been built there to expand the housing availability in Attleboro. And then, of course, the building itself, which is a historical treasure. We've been able to do a great job in restoring, and the academy is growing, and we're able to do some things too. So I believe I want to bring all of that creativity to the State House, to work across the aisle, but not just to talk, but to find creative solutions to the real problems that we're facing here in Massachusetts. And I'd appreciate your vote on March 6th.
Okay. I've lived in many different places throughout my military career, and one thing I've yearned for is the opportunity to use my diverse experiences and education to effect positive and long-lasting change in my own community. I cherish having friends and neighbors that I can work with and for to make things better. That's what's important to me. I came to Attleboro after my retirement, and I often tell the story about my mom, who would pack 7 of us kids into the back of a station wagon, and we would go to Cape Run Park. For the longest time, I thought Frosty was the only animal in the zoo because we could often not afford to go into the zoo, and that's the only animal you could see from the outside. So I have really fond memories of this city. When I arrived in Attleboro, this community opened its arms to me. You have allowed me to join all your organizations and really feel a part of this community. For someone who has moved around every few years or so, it's really hard for me to put into words how your kindness has affected me, and I will always be grateful. I will always look for ways to thank you, to repay you for your kindness of accepting me as one of your own. That's very important to me. When you go to the polls on March 6th, remember that this is your vote. This is your decision. As you do cast your vote, please consider not which candidate was the most eloquent speaker who had the cleverest answers. Those are important, but most important, it's which candidate has the most experience and has truly shown a commitment to this city. Through the relationships I have fostered with our local legislative representatives, I have and I will continue to advocate at the state level for issues that impact this city, Attleboro. I am truly humbled for this opportunity to continue to serve this city, and I would love to be your state representative. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our panelists this evening, Jim Hand from the Sun Chronicle and Ariana Conte. I'd also like to thank our candidates. I think that they certainly afforded themselves very well. I would again like to thank you for your civility this evening. I know that these are not often easy times and easy situations to be put in. Again, I do believe that Attleboro is very lucky to have people that are as passionate and as committed to the area as all of our candidates this evening were. One of the things that I talked about earlier before the debate started is that we now live in a society where politics is rarely discussed and it evokes such strong emotions. People are often afraid to talk politics. If we don't talk politics, we can't fix what's out there and what's wrong. I hope that tonight, if nothing else, has gotten some of you thinking about the issues of the area, and you'll begin to talk to your neighbors about what's going on in your city and how you can make a difference. So I urge all of you, again, make sure you go out and vote in March. Make sure that your vote and your voice is heard. Thank you all so much for coming. We really do appreciate it. Have a great night and a great weekend.
Political communications, my daughter made this, and she's just going to go up with the